Do you want to get started?
Fire away.
Okay, I'm going to start with the digital first. Again, Arthur, if you just allow me a couple seconds to introduce each image and the award points, and then I'll turn it over to you for critique.
Okay, great.
All right, let's see. We've got,
What
okay.
just happened?
Hey, I see that Pentax camera repair. You're a
Bear with
Pentax
me.
man.
Bear with me.
Aha.
Oh, I thought I
Everyone-
did something.
Does everyone see a pink door?
I
do.
I-
Yes.
Okay,
Woo.
here we go. This is the digital awards, and the first image is the pink door, 24 points. Arthur?
Okay. I thought that the focus could be a little sharper, but I thought the composition worked pretty well. I particularly thought the upper left hand, that blue fixture, works nicely with the symmetry of the image. It has a kind of documentary feeling to it. But the three colors, I think, play off well against one another. I think with a lot of these, one of the questions to ask is it interesting enough? I'll probably be mentioning that in a number of instances. I think the color kind of breaks this up and makes it more interesting than it would ordinarily be.
Okay, next is Cemetery Vault, 24 points.
Okay. I like the symmetry and playing the forms against the landscape in the background. I wondered if it would work better if the angle were a little different so that the top of the structure was more against the snow rather than blending into the landscape, but that might have been intentional. The white behind the second level of whiteness, the snow there, seems a little too clean and too white. I'd like to see a little more definition in that area of the snow. And I wonder if the black frame, you don't really see it in here, but when I was looking at it, it has a pretty heavy black frame. And I thought that really took away from the subtlety of the image.
Okay. Next, 1 and 1 are 3, 19 points.
Okay. I think the problem with this image is that it would probably work better if it were a head-on view. The slight angle doesn't seem to improve the image, and the composition becomes less interesting again. I think and also maybe a little more of the doors would make sense. It seems a little arbitrary what we're looking at.
Okay. This is called Sunlit Door, 28 points, and it's tied for third in regular Donna Hitchcock.
Okay, I really liked the complexity of this. I thought the reflections, the color on the edges really worked nicely. Even the little bit of shadow I thought broke up, made this become a much more complex and interesting image. I think it could have used a few minor adjustments in terms of the composition. I wonder, for instance, if the artist had used the lens correction filter in Photoshop to really line everything up a little more. That top angle, and this is really picky, but I like this so much that I would have liked to have seen it perfectly lined up on top, and I think it could have been refined very easily. But to me, this is one of the more ambitious images, and I really liked, as I said, the complexity of so many things happening.
This is called Lee Fire Station, 28 points, tied for third in regular, Bob Taylor.
I thought this was well executed, a nice balance of the various elements. I think the column on the left really plays well with the main image. The lighting works well. My one question is whether that road could have been maybe straightened a little bit, but I'm not sure about that. I did take some of these and I made screenshots and played around with them in Photoshop just to see if any of my suggestions made any sense. And, you know, some of them did, some of them didn't. But I like this. I thought it was a pretty solid execution.
Okay. I hope I pronounced this correctly. La Bodega Favorita, 26 points.
I like the fact that we were looking through a doorway. I think this is one of the few images where the actual passageway became an important element in the composition. I like the color and the variation in the color. Again, I think maybe the external walls could have been a little sharper in focus. But I thought the composition held together pretty well.
Okay. One Way Out, 27 points.
I like the moody expression of this image. I think it's simple, but really is effective. You really wonder what's on the other side of that door. My one suggestion would be if the center verticals could be totally parallel to the sides. I think that, and it's just a minor tilt there, but I think that would strengthen everything. And then the question I had too was whether a little more detail in the darks would, it's interesting, when I saw this originally, it didn't appear to have as much detail as it does on the screen right now. So that might be a moot point, but I think it's a question to ask. How much, you know, if you squint your eyes at this and you lose some of that detail, it really still is a very strong image and maybe even stronger. So I think that's a question that would be worth maybe experimenting a little bit. But again, I really like the composition.
This
Oh,
is
and
called
hey,
Final
Jim?
Door,
Jim.
27 points.
Sorry, I'm just wondering, did that last image place anything?
No, it did not.
It did not. Okay. I was just surprised by the 27 and all.
Yeah.
Okay. I like this image a lot. This was one of the images I really I debated back and forth. I think technically it's strong. It's a nice composition. I'd like to see a little more. You just have a touch of that bottom area with some leaves, and I think the composition would have been stronger if there was more of that. So I think maybe going back a little bit, but I like the solidity of the composition and the variation between the door panel and the different textures. Again, I like this a lot.
This is called Mediterranean Cathedral Door in Budapest, 20 points.
Okay, again, we're getting some keystoning here, and I think if this were worked on in Photoshop, it would help either using the perspective cropping tool or the lens correction filter. I think if the verticals were parallel to the sides, it would work better. And then I think a longer view might also strengthen the image. There's an awful lot of interesting things going around that you really just get a snatch of. I think it would make a stronger image if it were that decorative area was a little more dominant.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is called Weathered Portal, 30 points, first place in regular Susan Lynch Smith.
Okay, I thought this was a very dramatic image. I like being able to look through those windows. The composition is an interesting one. I think even the little stray branches add a nice touch to it, but it really has a mood and a quality to it that really gives it some expression. And I, again, thought it held together well.
That was how many points?
What's that?
How many points was that last one?
30.
30, okay. What was it called? I didn't get the name.
Susan Lynch Smith.
I mean, what's the name of the picture?
Oh, I'm sorry, Weathered Portal.
Okay, thank you.
This one's called The Red Door, 26 points, first place in advanced, John Mathis.
Okay, I found this to be a very striking image. I think technically it's handled really well. My first impression was kind of wow. And I think if you look at the elements, they're really very carefully handled.
Okay.
My one question would be if something else could be superimposed over this. You know, I don't know how people feel about manipulating images in any major way, but I wonder if something could tie it together, a shadow, some branches, something that you would look through and then see this. But it's a real solid image, designed very well. Yeah.
Okay. This one is called Art Nouveau Cabinet, 19 points.
Okay. This is one of the more documentary images. And my main question here was whether a longer view would work a little better. It doesn't seem interesting enough as it stands. I'd like to see something more. Also, the glare, which is probably unavoidable in this situation, takes away from really focusing on the image. And I wonder if not a longer view, maybe a closer view where just the center area would make more sense. It's kind of half and half. It doesn't quite feel resolved.
This is called Just a Door, 21 points.
Okay, I'm not sure what's going on here, whether it's a fragment of a bigger image, because things look to be pretty smudged like, and I don't know whether that's a particular filter or something, but I find myself really kind of squinting, trying to make more sense out of this. It's difficult to really see what's going on. I think if it were a straight, more defined image, it would actually work a lot better. There's some really nice color in the upper right-hand corner, but you're not really getting a photographic feeling from it. It's not quite a painting, but it feels more like it's heading in that direction.
Okay, next, it's called Dare to Enter. 23 points, second place in advanced, Lynn O'Connell.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. Technically, it's a strong image. I think it's an interesting image. Again, one question I would have is whether a frontal view, a full frontal view might work better, might be more interesting. But I do like what's happening on the left-hand side where there's some interesting forms occurring. The texture comes out really well and you have a real feeling for the materials. I just wonder if it wouldn't be more dramatic if you were looking at it face on.
Okay. This is called Abandon. 29 points, second place in regular, Susan Lynch Smith.
Again, I think it's a really interesting, complex composition, a lot of things going on. And I like the play of the natural forms, the landscape, the wooden structures, the little traces of color. Has a lot happening. Great variety of textures and materials. And an interesting combination of sharpness and softness that I think really works well. And I think it's the kind of image you could spend a lot of time just looking at and kind of discovering different little sections and elements that at first view may be a bit hidden.
Okay, this is the last one in this category. Door of Antiquity, 20 points, third place in advance, Jim Smith.
Okay. Again, technically, it's a nice sharp image. My tendency, this was one that I think I did a screenshot and played around in Photoshop a little bit. I think the door could come out a little more. You have that fragment on the left that's very brilliant, and then it goes into shadow. And I think it's almost a too extreme difference. I think if some of that were dodged, it would work better. And I think the shadow on the lower right-hand corner is a distraction. I think it either has to play more into the whole composition or maybe just kind of be removed.
Okay, shall we move on to the prints?
Okay.
Okay, first up, this is called Worship Within. 26 points, second place in advanced, Lynn O'Connell.
Okay. I think it's technically strong, well designed, has a nice feeling. My one main quibble with it is, and it may sound really strange, but the way the steps, there's a meeting point at the closest of each step, and it's not lined up with that door. And I wonder if the photographer just moved just a tiny bit, whether that wouldn't play up the symmetry of the whole composition.
I would have ripped those papers off the door.
Well, you can get in a lot of trouble doing that.
Yeah,
I don't know how to
I don't think
advise
they would
that.
have appreciated that.
It's a thought, though. But I think it works well. And I like, again, symmetry with with a little variation on the two sides.
Okay. This is called Shadow Doors, 30 points, first and regular, Susan Lynch Smith. And obviously this is a black and white.
Yeah, I couldn't suggest anything to do with this. I think it just works perfectly the way it is. Really nicely designed, good technique. I think the shadow of those trees really make the image, as well as the shadow of the structures. It just holds together, I thought, really well, has a nice tonal range. As I say, I would leave this alone.
Okay. Welcome to the Fiesta, 27 points, first and regular, Jean Driscoll.
Okay, I like the simplicity of the forms, and the Fiesta feeling comes through really well. The color obviously plays in that. I think it's a little busy. My tendency would be to crop a little on the bottom and maybe even on the top, and focus more on the hanging colored cloths and the actual building structure.
Yes.
This is called The Greatest Downfall, 23 points.
I like it. I think it's subtle. I wonder if it's not too subtle, whether it needs a little more intensity. And again, these verticals on the left-hand side, I would much prefer them to be parallel to the side. They're, again, just a little bit off. But my tendency would be to intensify the tones a little bit, still keeping it subtle. I like the mystery of really what you're looking at. And the other thing, I might crop a little on the bottom. I played around with this in Photoshop as well, and I think it could be refined.
It would make a good Weight Watchers commercial, huh?
What is,
I don't know.
Okay,
What if the door was shut?
moving right along. Coronavirus vaccine found, 17 points.
Well, I really like the title and the idea of it. Again, there's the feeling of the keystoning. I think cropping the right-hand side quite a bit would help considerably. And again, is it interesting enough? I mean, the title may make it interesting enough, but visually, I'm not sure. But I think it could be tightened up, again, playing around with the verticals and cropping. There's a good third of the right-hand side that just doesn't have to be there. And I think if you take your hand and you just block off some of the right, it immediately becomes a stronger, more tied in composition.
If it was a bottle of wine, it would be even more interesting.
Perhaps.
Arnold?
Okay, this is called Owner Over Servant's Doorway, 27 points, tie for first and advance, Jim Smith.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
nice.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to live there.
That is beautiful.
It's a really nice,
Downstairs.
That's
nicely
an
designed
Amsterdam.
image. I think the windows, the glass work nicely, and this section on the right gives you a really kind of interesting feeling. The only suggestion I might have with this is I wonder if the trash can needs to be there. And if you cropped up to that point, I think it would still be a strong image, maybe even stronger.
Maybe just
But
take
other
the
than
red
that,
out.
I think it works really well.
Okay, next is Door to Technology wins. 27 points, tie for first in advance, Jim Smith.
Okay. What I like about this a lot is the scale of that small figure against this monumental
Yes, that's
arch
interesting.
and doorway. Again, you have some keystoning that would be really easy to resolve, but this is one case where the keystoning actually may work as an advantage. But my tendency would be to try it both ways, try it as it is now, and also try to make those verticals more vertical and parallel to the sides. But I think it's a solid image, works well.
What were the points on that one?
27. Okay, this is called Peekaboo Santorini, 24 points, third in advanced, Lynn O'Connell.
I like this one a lot. It's in a way, it's one of my favorite images. I'm bothered a little bit by the paving stones. I wonder if you really need that. If you crop that out, wouldn't it be a more interesting image? And then I wonder if there could be a little richer quality to the center section where you have all these interesting textures and forms and colors. And I think maybe playing around with the vibrancy slider might be worth it. Maybe masking out that area and playing around with it. If it were a digital image, obviously, if it's not, then there's not much you can do with it.
Okay, next, it's called Election Day, 25 points, second in regular, Gene Driscoll.
This is very different than most of the other images, and I think it works well. I would definitely crop off maybe the top, I'd say the top sixth of the image. Towards the top of that poster, I think if you crop there, you would really focus on what the most interesting part of the composition is, which are these figures and movement and action, the background figures, the whole environment. But I think the top is really extraneous, and it just would strengthen the whole image to remove some of that.
This is called Welcome Home, Dad. 26 points, second in advance, David Simmons, and obviously a black and white.
I like the drama. I'd crop off a little on either side and focus more on the doorway and the dog. And again, this is a case where the keystoning, I think, actually works, and I wouldn't play around with that at all. But I would tighten up the composition by coming in on both sides a bit.
Okay.
Last one, or I'm sorry, second to last one. This is called The Pig's Ear, 22 points, third in regular, Linda Lambert.
Well, this is one where I think the keystoning could be improved or eliminated by making, but I guess these aren't digital, right? So again, this is trickier to do. If you were doing this in your own color darkroom, you could do it, but obviously if you're not if you're not actually making the print, you can't. But it's such a clean image that I think you want everything to be lined up correctly and convincingly. There's a lot going on. Again, it's more of a documentary image. And, you know, one possibility which would kind of eliminate the keystoning would be to come in and crop out some of it and focus on the door and, you know, just a little ways around it and eliminate some of the distractions along the edges.
Okay, this last one is a black and white. It's called Enter the Job World, 18 points, third and regular, Donna Hitchcock.
I really wanted to like this one more than I did. I think it has a nice mood, but I'm not sure that the fact that it's so out of alignment works. And I'd like to see more of the actual texture. So I think if it were lightened up a bit, not a lot, but a little bit, it would work better. Again, one could play with the keystoning a bit. It's not quite keystoning, it's more at an angle. And I certainly think that could be straightened. I think it would be interesting to show a little bit more around the door, putting it in a broader context.
Okay, that's it.